whether this is good for the consumers or not. No, of course, we've been hearing so many stories and reading so many stories, but it's good to hear it from the regulator themselves and also from independent analysts and stakeholders. With that, Attorney Kat will greet and acknowledge our resource persons for this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'd like to acknowledge our resource persons for today from the National Telecommunications Commission, Director Imelda Walshen, and Engineer Roberto Tolentino. We're still waiting for our resource person from the DICT. Joining us also is a Senior Research Fellow from the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, Dr. Ramonette Serafica. From the democracy.net.ph, co-founder and co-founder Engineer Pierre Tito Galia. From Internet Society of the Philippines, Mr. Winthrop Yu. From the Ateneo de Manila University, he's a professor and the founding director of the Ateneo Innovation Center, Dr. Gregory Tangonan. And from the Philippine Coalition of Consumers, Mr. Ricardo Samaniego. Thank you, sir.
Right, thank you, Attorney Kat. We will start with the independent stakeholders. I know some of them have their own presentation to share. We will start with Dr. Greg Tangonan. No, Dr. Greg, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Do you have a PowerPoint?
Yes, I think they can flash it. If you, we'll take a minute.
The support joint tayo. No? I recognize the presence of Senator Miguel Zubiri, who's a co-chair of this public hearing. Go ahead, Dr. Tangonan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Hi. Regulations are proving crucial to guaranteeing high quality of service and quality of experience in wireless access systems. Competition worldwide has actually created a groundswell of new regulations. So I'd like to give us a view of what regulation looks like in the outside world, and what trends actually protect consumers, allow them to have good choice, and make them very certain about the quality of service and the value for money. The other aspect, next chart please. Okay, so I'll talk about the wireless access, and we will see that, in fact, some of these provisions that we have not so well enforced, like the intercarrier provision, leads to an awful lot of problems. And the other part, regulation actually must anticipate new content delivery systems. As we build out the knowledge economy, we will need to have a new regulatory environment that will allow flexibility. So in that, I'll talk about very quickly about different trends. And yes, I'll bring up the 700 megahertz, but in a very different context, a context we had not, you have not actually talked about. Next slide, please. Okay. So if you look at the different regulations that might, one very interesting one is the enforcement of intercarrier provisioning. In other words, carriers around the world, let's say in the U.S., AT&T, Verizon, all these others, when you call from AT&T to Verizon, there should be no difference in the quality of service. And that's because they've required to provide bandwidth and also the software so that the service is actually transparent. Now, there's always arguments about how much does it cost, and the FCC in the United States is actually driving those carrier charges to actually zero. What's the impact of that? If you look at the picture over there, you have System A and System B, and by guaranteeing intercarrier, you have complete transparency. Users can actually move from one carrier to the other and will not experience a loss in quality of service if they decide to leave one carrier and move to the other. In the Philippines, we have, if you ask the quality of service, but you ask the intercarrier quality of service, that's the worst possible question you can ask both carriers, precisely because if I try to call, I have a smart subscriber, if I try to call Globe, my chances of getting a line are practically zero, but if I do get through, I might connect, but only for about 10 seconds. So that's the reality of the not regulating them to guarantee that the interoperability of the service. So you can give them all the spectrum you want, but they're marketing themselves as completely separate entities. Okay, so if my driver wants to call, he's a smart subscriber and he wants to call somebody in Globe, he'll look for a free Wi-Fi and use Viber. Or I have to go buy a data plan to call my wife who's in Globe, and I use Viber. But the system, the standards, the GSM standards, LTE standards, are designed for complete interoperability. It's just that we don't enforce and we don't force them to allocate bandwidth and also the software that has to do. They're allowed, in fact, to run them as completely separate. Consumers all over the world have other new things happening. Yes, they have legislated wireless local number portability, so that you can actually leave the carrier with no penalty at all, and you can keep that number forever. Recently, in 2015, the U.S. Had this Unlocking Consumer Choice and Wireless Competition Law. It's a very interesting name, but essentially it unlocks all phones. It requires all carriers to unlock all phones. The locking is a vestige of the original rollout of smartphones, where Apple had exclusive relationships with AT&T, and you were locked in, and others were locked out. But that is completely over, and yet we still see phones that are being locked to a particular carrier, and you're locked in a long-term contract.
No, just to cut you off. So in the U.S., there's no more locking of phones.
That legislation is, yeah, if you have even a legacy phone, you just go to AT&T, you can do it. Other carriers, you can just do it online. There are no more locking of phones.
And that's viewed as anti-competitive, the locking of phones.
That's precisely why you notice the name of it. It's consumer choice, allowing consumers to leave one carrier without any penalty. And it is allowed now a number of manufacturers, like Apple, they're selling their phones direct. You can buy unlocked phones directly, and I would be surprised that almost all the carriers will be only selling unlocked phones.
And then the first one, the earlier you mentioned the interoperability.
Yes.
Ngayon pwede naman, 'di ba? When you call let's say smart to globe, globe to smart, you can I mean you can call one another.
We
So-
can we can do an experiment. We can try. It happens every day. So
Right.
people say they call me and then we have 10 minutes if they get through. But if I try to call my wife, I'll have to try several times. So the only way I call my wife is through Viber. I have to buy a data
It's
account.
not as easy, you mean, to
Well,
connect from one carrier to the
but-
other.
The rest of the world has complete transparency on this. We in the Philippines, because these two entities are are really separate.
Is that a function of technology or a function of regulation?
We never actually quantified, to the best of my knowledge, we never quantified how much bandwidth they had to allocate between themselves, nor did we actually force them to make sure that all the registers and all the software actually, where to find the customer and others. We let them market themselves, just stay within the smart, stay within the globe.
All right. Okay.
Normally, when we have these kinds of meetings, we're always wondering about quality of service and quality of experience. So I have a suggestion that maybe we can get the universities to actually form quality of service and quality of experience labs for consumers. And they can measure what the speed they really get as consumers. Normally, the telcos have that information. NTC is supposed to have that kind of information, but we have found over time that the students can actually do a pretty interesting job. The next chart will show you some data that we took. I didn't want to. We actually do this, but I didn't want to get current data. So students can measure the upload speeds. And so there isn't, if we actually institute that the different regions, the schools, every month they can be publishing what we're getting on fixed, wireless. And what that takes is DOST, DICT, and NTC allowing licensed engineer, ECE faculty to make these kinds of measurements along with their students and ask the students to publish these results. I think this could be an objective measure. It's not qualitative or anything like that. This is real experience of what consumers had. So that is a suggestion going forward. As I said, the next chart, please. As I said, we have a lab in the Ateneo where we're looking at how the effects of convergence on information delivery, how people interact with content. This is the next generation of that knowledge economy, where we now create content and we want to present the content and watch people interact. If you look at the next slide. So what we see now is that you have the old-fashioned television at home. You broadcast into the home. Now television is completely different. People watch on multiple screens at the same time. So a broadcaster has many opportunities now to have people interact with their content. So we shouldn't have the regulations on a broadcaster that we had long ago, and bring that bring that going forward. So you might really want to ask who gets to do this highly active, interactive subscriber businesses. Is it just the telcos, or is it the broadcasters, or some other combination? What hangs in the balance is whether or not Filipinos who create content have new channels of offering it. Next slide, please. So a very good example is a system that ISDBT system that we adopted. It's a Japanese standard for digital broadcast. Now, the digital broadcast standard actually allows interactive TV. So we have actually adopted a standard that could put broadcasters in the interactive TV business. And that's built into the standard. But it's not clear to me that they have the ability or they will have a license. Now remember that you have quite a number of you. ABS-CBN, you have Hope Channel, you have Iglesia and others who would be very interested in actually having that kind of capability. So which brings me to my last slide. which says, what if there was another other carrier that had 700 megahertz capability for wireless internet, and they were teamed with one of these, all of these broadcasters, they could together offer this state-of-the-art, almost 4G, 5G interactive IPTV. So what is the regulatory environment that would allow this to happen? So this is the opportunity cost of having just the telcos operate on 700 megahertz. So last chart. So in summary, I've kind of given you an overview, and I've come at the 700 megahertz allocation from a completely different viewpoint, from the viewpoint of what the broadcasters could do over the next decade, using their broadcast capability. They're even focused. They can do on-demand TV over this broadband wireless network, and they can have interactive content. Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you, Dr. Greg. Dr. Greg, I just want to clarify, can you go back to the slide before? This runs on the 700 megahertz platform.
I'm positing, when I heard about this, in my own mind, I designed this network.
Okay.
I said, oh my gosh, if those...
But I would assume this is not regulated.
I
Because
don't know the
NTC only regulates voice. Tama ba? Sa NTC? Hindi ganito. For example, this is all data streaming, I would assume. No? But this is, for example, I'm just putting myself in the consumer standpoint. No? May ganitong setup, pero mabagaling streaming. Is that regulated? Pwede ba natin sabihin, mabagal yung pag-flash ng TV? Pwede ba sabihin na NTC mabagal yan, then dapat i-penalize ko yung carrier? Sige, Pierre.
So what the good doctor is referring to is the ISDBT standard. The frequencies used for this is actually the frequencies that we're using now.
Okay.
So it's the television frequencies. What we're moving from is from the analog transmission to full cut over to digital services on 2023. So in that television standard, nandun po yung mga frame rate, nandun po yung mga standards na it sets yung quality of the television broadcast.
My question is, who regulates that?
That's the NTC regulating
So the
that.
quality
Of
is
the-
regulated by
Yes.
NTC.
And it also has additional benefits which they're already demonstrating now in the DICT, like DRRM alerts. So you're watching TV, and then there's a typhoon coming, get out of your house, that sort of thing. They're demonstrating that already.
May ano kasi is, from a consumer standpoint, you will be paying for this.
Eventually, sir.
And
Starting 2023.
the quality that will be delivered to the customers, who
Uh,
regulates that?
Sir, it's going to be free TV also.
Okay.
So, kumbaga, ABS-CBN right now is free.
Okay.
They're on analog. Come 2023, there will be no more analog broadcasting. It will become digital.
Sorry. Okay.
And it's still free TV. So, dahil free TV siya, there's nothing that we're paying for except the ads or if we're using cable TV and so on. Yung two-way communication ng ISDBT is a function that's already, if we so choose, kung bibili tayo ng smart TV, meaning televisions with CPUs and such, then there will be the capability to go through the broadcasting entity like ABS-CBN or GMA to access richer content. One theoretical example would be like, I'm watching Game of Thrones now, and then suddenly I want to pause it because I want to go through a special, I want to focus on the director's comments and so on. That's the capability of the two-way transmission. Will it have the capability to go into the World Wide Web? Theoretically, it can. But again, that's something that's far in the future pa. Demonstrable na siya sa lab, but not yet for commercial use.
So going back, this is not within that 700 megahertz bandwidth that we are talking about. This is beyond.
This is completely not in the 700 megahertz range. I submitted actually to your officer an analysis of where we are spectrum-wise for telecommunications purposes, not for broadcast, but for telecommunications purposes involving 700. But we can discuss that at your leisure, sir.
Later on na lang siguro. No.
Mr. Chair, the reason I drew that up was to show that, yes, ISDBT has this interactive capability, but if we allow a third party to come in using 700 megahertz, they could team with the broadcasters and create this network. It would be a very powerful network, and I would guess that if we allowed this to happen, the digital TV rollout would be enhanced, because now the broadcasters see an opportunity to go into interactive content. Okay.
I am a potential third party, a third competitor, third party competitor, and I'm allocated with that 700 megahertz. I can actually team up with ABS and launch this type of service.
And they would be very, very interested in that. So that's why remember, they gave up this. The broadcasters gave up the spectrum to allow these things to happen, and now with this new kind of architecture, they have a reason to come back and demand that we can have very high-speed broadband connection at the same time their broadcasts or directed broadcasts. So it's a brand new opportunity, and so we haven't really heard that there is a foothold for the broadcasters in the 700 megahertz.
Right.
And that's why I drew that up purposely that way.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Tongonan. Our next presenter, PIDS, ma'am. We can deliberate on some of the topics later on.
Good afternoon. Sir, can I ask a question about the earlier presentation? I was just wondering if there's now capability for broadcast to be delivered through the same system. If broadcast is considered mass media, and mass media is still covered by the constitutional restriction, and it will not be, and even if there are efforts to amend the PSA, and therefore only the public utility definition would be amended, is there still such a restriction that we will be facing? So I guess that's my question for the floor.
So you mean if this will be used for broadcast,
Yes.
it has to have a different franchise.
If this
Tama?
would be, I'm not sure about the legal requirements, but my understanding is if you will offer broadcast services, which is considered mass media, then you will have to adhere to the 100% or zero foreign equity restriction
Okay.
according to the Constitution. So even if, I think there are moves now to amend
Yes,
the
the
PSA, it will only touch on telecommunications, and
The wire
therefore,
business.
yes, and therefore we would still not be able to take advantage of the convergence because yung definition is still
Well, that's a whole
embedded
new
in the
separate
Constitution.
topic, I think.
Yes.
We'll talk
Yes,
about that.
but so
later
I
on.
guess that
But we'll
points
take
to
note of
my-
that. That's a
yes.
good, Dr. Serafica, that's a good point. That well, a lot of things are going on right now. Amending the Public Services Act, amending the Telecoms Act, strengthening NTC. So all of these are happening all at the same time. No, we have to.
We have
It's a good
to.
point that we have to watch out for the future. No, baka we're amending it now. After 2 years, we need to amend it again. no?
Yes.
So, but that's a very good, valid point. Po. And maybe PIDS can give us a sort of like a policy paper on that. no?
Yes. Okay. So thank you very much for inviting PIDS. I prepared as a note, which I think we've already sent to your office. It builds on the submission of Dr. Medalla, who attended last December. And in that particular brief, you will recall that she mentioned that there is a need for a combination of liberalization, competition, and regulatory reforms. So although I appreciate that there are different committees handling these different issues, at the end of the day, we have to have a holistic approach in terms of improving the sector. So in particular, I think in this particular note that I've submitted, I've suggested good practice principles for the regulation of Telecommunications, corresponding to the topics that you've identified for this afternoon, which are how do we strengthen the independence of NTC, and then what are the reforms needed to encourage trade, investment, and innovation in the sector. So it is our position, and it's the same position that we've submitted to Congress in relation to the amending the PSA, that embedding good principles in the regulatory framework should be seen as complementary measures to in the efforts to liberalize services. So these are complementary. You cannot pursue one without the other. Otherwise, either you won't get the outcomes that you wish, or you might even, the situation might even become worse off. You liberalize without strengthening your regulatory framework. So, sir, I've actually listed. Yes. So imagine if you open up and you still have weak regulatory frameworks, you're just going to transfer the rents from the domestic oligarchs to foreign participants. So again, we have to have a coherent approach in terms of reforming the sector. So, sir, in relation to strengthening the independence of the regulator and specifically in regulatory governance, so independence is defined as free of constraints from either the government or the private sector in exercising its authority. And there are various mechanisms to safeguard independence. I don't know if should I read them out or just key elements of these elements. So, for example, it has been advised that regulatory agencies should be created by its own law, so that it has a legal standing that is independent from other legal interference. And other characteristics of the regulatory agency should be as follows. So they have a stable and reliable source of revenue. They can offer competitive compensation packages and career opportunities to its personnel. They have the power to establish the administrative structure of the agency and others, so on and so forth. So I would also like to note that independence alone is not the only principle of good regulatory governance. So equally important are principles that to improve sector outcomes include accountability, transparency, and public participation, predictability, clarity of roles, completeness and clarity of rules, proportionality, having the requisite powers, and the ability to consistently perform professionally, competently, and with integrity. So, sir, in the second portion, or you've also asked for comments on what sort of reforms are needed to encourage investment and innovation in the sector. Again, I would like to propose various regulatory principles that will improve governance in telecommunications and ICT services. These are not things that I've invented. These are based on deliberations done at the APEC level, which was conducted in 2014. So they gathered experts and practitioners from throughout the APEC region, and they produced several principles to cover regulatory intervention. So again, as mentioned, the need for transparency, certainty, and cooperation, flexibility, and regulatory enforcement. Another aspect of the set of principles that will help with encourage investment in innovation is open markets and licensing regimes that are simple and flexible, where you have established criteria. You have to also have a set of principles to govern or to introduce or strengthen the pro-competitive environment, and of course we all already appreciate this given that we have created the PCC. And then finally, with respect to innovation, a new set of principles also with respect to new ICT services, for example, regulatory forbearance, meaning that not being too restrictive in allowing new services to be introduced, and other principles such as flow of information. So, sir, we've submitted these principles to your office for your consideration. Thank you.
Dr. Serafica, have you conducted any in-depth research on how NTC should be strengthened and restructured independently? Meron ba kayo sa PIDS? I read
sir, wala
Dr.
pa po.
Lianto's spectrum management paper, but this is a long time ago eh. Matagal na ito eh. Nasundan ba ho to? wala kayong independent analysis. Wala ba ho kayong ginagawa as PIDS?
Specific to telecom, sir, wala po. At saka sa NTC, wala. Focusing on NTC in particular, wala ko kaming ginagawa. Right now, for my own research, I'm looking at, because I've moved away from telecoms. This used to be my research area from 20 years ago, but I've not followed the technology side. So now I look at services in general. This year we're looking at logistics. So next year we might look at ICT and financial services because these two seem to be merging. So, but sir, if you have a request, I'm sure I can.
Yeah, I want to make a formal request to PIDS to look at this sector, in depth, and definitely there's a lot of consumer related issues, as well as we all know that throughout the last two hearings, I can hear a lot of suggestions on the regulatory environment as well as the regulator. But having said that, it's good to have an independent institution to study this and to look at this in depth. We dito sa Senate, we've asked CEPO, which is the research group, to look at this also, but it's good to put our heads together. Again, there's a lot of proposals, but my view here is it's looking at the industry as a whole and the direction of the industry para hindi tayo matali. Because once we have a piece of legislation now and then it will change 2 or 3 years from now, then we have a big problem. So, yeah, that's a formal request from to PIDS. Yeah. All right. We'll go with the Pierre. Do you have any presentation? No, other than I know you've been presenting here in the Senate every day. Pero baka may bago kang
No naman,
to
sir.
share. But
But
it's good. I'm enlightened ever since that you've been sharing with us your knowledge. I've been using your anecdotes and your knowledge in our hearings.
yes, sir. We excerpted, siguro I can show na lang the recent submission
Sige,
that
please, please.
And I only need the graphic of the spectrum the current spectrum allocation
That
for
is actually one of the core topics right now. So,
Right.
and the thing is with the hearing, with the smart franchise, that aspect never comes up,
never does.
and it's because it's not part of the topic, So
Correct,
that's
sir.
why in this hearing, we want to focus on that, So we have a global perspective.
Yes, sir. For the benefit of the body, democracy.net.ph published a paper on how the president and the government as a whole can make Philippine ICT, not just telecommunications, better. And it's fairly comprehensive. Please take a look at it. Thank you. Yes. In that paper, you will find this graph, this chart. This chart was taken from NTC data that we acquired through an FOI request. And as you can see, the total amount of this series of spectrum refers only to mobile and fixed wireless communications. So the maroon refers to Globe, the red refers to PLDT Smart, yellow is aggregating all others, and green is NTC allocatable. So insofar as the total allocatable mobile frequencies, wireless frequencies are concerned for telecommunications, NTC only has 13% to allocate. Other small players have 12%, and Globe and Smart together have 70% of the spectrum. What is important to note is that the workhorse frequencies of your cell phones, which are 900, 1800, 1900, and 2100 megahertz, and you will see this in the user manuals of your phones. There, for 900, it's completely owned by the telcos. There's nothing remaining for allocation to any new player.
Can you repeat the workhorse? The workhorse.
Frequency, sir?
Yes.
900, 1800, 1900, and 2100.
So when you say workhorse, ito yung ginagamit ng
Calls, text. This is your Edge, GPRS, and 3G.
Okay, so with this 4 spectrum, this takes up the entire services of using your cell phone.
Yes, sir. Newer cell phones will have, for example, the LTE enabled. LTE enabled will have 700, 850, 2500, up to 3400. But these are not the common phones. If we're going by the ordinary phone of the ordinary Filipino person, the most that we'll have is the 4, 900, 1800, 1900, 2100.
Ako as a consumer, so
Yes,
ito
sir.
yung apat na ginagamit kong spectrum.
So yun yung high-end ng pangmasa.
Okay.
But yung normal na pangmasa po is 900, 1800, 1900. So it's just those three. Now, if you're going to take a look at what's available, there is no spectrum on the 900 megahertz that can be allocated to a new player. This implies that that a new player cannot offer cellular mobile services running on 900. He cannot also offer cellular mobile services running on 1800. He may be able to offer 1900 megahertz cellular mobile services, but the downside of 1900 is that there's only a limited amount of channels. So that's the only channels that he has. Whereas the channel from Globe and PLDT Smart will include 900 and 1800 in its cellular mobile rollout. And if you will look at 2100, there's only 25% that the NTC can allocate. And Globe and PLDT Smart have the rest. There are no other new players. In sum, sir, as you can see in the total, there's not enough spectrum for a new player to offer cellular mobile services to become a third player against Globe and PLDT. A new player might be able to offer only wireless broadband, maybe at the most mobile dongles, which will operate on 700, 850, 2500 and 3400, but they will not be able to offer the common this is the more lucrative, this is the market for the Filipino people.
For example lang, Pierre, no? Kasi malapit na tayo sa China, and China wants to come here and put up a third player. So, pwede siyang makakuha lang doon sa 13%, which is the green.
Yes, sir.
And is that enough to compete?
No, sir. Not at all.
Hindi siya makakompete.
Not at all.
He can set up a wireless broadband business, but that's about it.
Yes, sir. Sir,
Diba tinry na yan ng San Miguel?
Liberty Telecoms,
Oo.
yes, sir.
I remember, but it failed eh.
It did. And that was the infrastructure that they were supposed to sell. They were running on 700, sir. And offering only the wireless broadband wasn't enough of a business.
Yes, tama.
We have to remember that PLDT is also offering its wireless broadband business in connection with their cellular mobile and wired communications business. Same thing goes for Globe. So Liberty on its own, offering only fixed wireless wasn't enough.
This is post 700.
That was the
megahertz
700. That was,
acquisition, ano?
yes, sir. So, yeah, sir, Liberty was pre.
Sorry, itong slide mo. This is post.
This is post, sir. This is post already. This is the available allocation. This is why we've been speaking with the DICT with regard to policies like spectrum refarming, spectrum reallocation, which is something that we desperately need to do. And after all, the Filipino people own spectrum anyway, not the telcos. They're only licensed to use spectrum. The people of the Philippines own spectrum. Secondly, apart from spectrum reallocation and refarming, we're also proposing to the DICT and the NTC to move towards what is known as dynamic spectrum allocation. This is being done by the Telecoms Regulatory Agency of India, wherein Authority of India, wherein they allocate frequency not nationally. What we're doing, sir, for instance, if we authorize a 25 megahertz channel in the 900 megahertz band to Smart, buong Pilipinas po yan. So that means, if I don't put up a cell site, let's say in Lawag, that means unused yung frequency na yun in that location. How TRAI does it is they allocate the frequency in a certain location. So we can perhaps ask the NTC, why don't we do it by region? Then, because it's digital communications anyway, interference, signal to noise ratio are not really big issues compared to analog. We already do dynamic spectrum allocation on a regional basis for FM radio, for TV, and for AM radio, because we're able to control the distance of the transmission. A typical cell site is even shorter. The maximum na po, range of a cell site tower is 10 kilometers if they're lucky. Nasa 3 to 5 kilometers lang maximum. So for instance, if I allocate only a certain frequency in a province or even in a city like Valenzuela, tapos ibang frequency yung nasa katabing bayan, pwede pong mangyari yun if we do that kind of spectrum allocation.
Clarify ko lang, no? Earlier you mentioned reallocation, refarming.
Yes, sir.
With this 13%, pwede pa bang i-reallocate and refarm?
Sir, refarming and reallocation is it's a solution that the Philippines hasn't done yet, but I think it's time that we do.
But in this slide, which one will you refarm and reallocate?
Sir, all those frequencies will turn green, and then we allocate them
The
again.
yellow will turn green.
All of them, sir. Even the red and the maroon will turn green.
But somebody owns it already.
Sir, they don't own it. They're only licensed to use it, and we can take it back after due notice
so
and
kung
hearing.
hindi nila ginagamit, kunin ulit.
Sir,
In other words.
in other jurisdictions, even if they're already using it, like in Singapore, for instance, they take it away, and then they reallocate na naman in a fair and equitable basis.
Okay. What will be the basis for taking it back?
Opening it up to new players, sir. Creating spaces for new competition. The principle of use it or lose it. If they don't use it in a certain location, like say in Migkawayan in Bukidnon, then why will I give you a frequency that covers Migkawayan, Bukidnon? That sort of thing. There are so many reasons for us to take it away. Bottom line, actually, is that they don't own the frequency. They're only licensed to use the frequency. The frequency is owned by the Filipino people as represented by Congress and the regulatory agencies. If we decide to take it back, that's because we want to, and we're going to reallocate it. This is not new. It's being done in many other countries. The Thailand just recently, last year, December? Just recently, they had a spectrum auction. What they did was they took away some spectrum, and then they had it auctioned again. Also in other jurisdictions, spectrum is a channel or a band is not issued for the life of a franchise. A life of a franchise, 25 years, sir. But ang ginagawa po sa ibang jurisdiction, they only let you have it for 3 to 5 years, maximum 10. What happens is, if you don't use it in those 3 to 5 years or 10, they can take it back and then give it to someone else. If you're not using it, maximizing it, and so on. And at the end of that 5-year period, pwede na namang mag-jumble. So we must remember that the ability to adjust an antenna, a cabinet, a switch in this day and age is not difficult anymore. It's all a matter of typing a few numbers in a field on a computer, and it will tell the antenna you're only allowed to use these frequencies. It's not like back in the day where radio frequencies had to use analog vacuum tubes, and it would take a week to adjust the frequency. It's not like that anymore. It's very fast. That's why we can perform those kinds of changes.
Okay na tayo? Okay, siguro we'll go to NTC later on. No? I think marami dyan connected to NTC. But we'll finish with the independent participants. Si Mr. Winthrop, do you have anything to share? I know last time you shared a lot of your thoughts, no? But anything you want to add?
Just some reactions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I believe the presentation by Dr. Greg Tangonan of Ateneo, the point there that he's driving at, despite the fact that the frequencies used by ISDB are different from those used by mobile. They're lower. But he's describing a service, and I think the point that Dr. Greg would like to drive through, if Dr. Greg will allow me to speak, it seems that it's that if you allocate all the mobile frequencies to only the two current incumbents, then effectively any innovation in other spaces is effectively stymied, unless you have to go crawling, you have to go to the two dominant incumbents, no? That's one point. Another comment, because this was your question, Mr. Chair, regarding interconnection of the two networks. These do not depend on frequencies, because any interconnection, whether it's voice or whether it's data, happens between the data centers, no, the core networks of the two telcos. So hindi po dependiente yan sa frequency. Okay. Those are my observations for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Yu. The next is Mr. Ricardo Samaniego of the Philippine Coalition of Consumers. Sir.
Thank you, Chair. May I reserve my input and thoughts later? Please. I'm still...
Okay, thank you. We go to our regulators now. Sa NTC, ma'am, do you have any presentation or?
Magandang hapon po, sir. Magandang hapon po sa lahat. We will officially submit po yung sagot sa mga nasa agenda. Nonetheless, we would like to react po sa mga sinabi ng mga nag-present na kanina. Sa part po ng PIDS, we appreciate the very comprehensive appreciation of what is the telecom environment po ngayon. So truly enough, the regulator does its action on the premise that ito po yung rule natin ngayon. Ito yung batas natin ngayon. So, hindi po pwedeng gumawa ng rule and regulations yung regulator na NTC na hindi po nasasakop nung basic na batas, that is 7925, including po yung, yes sir, that is our governing law, and including observance of what are indicated in our constitution. Sa presentation po kanina, yung sa broadcast, that is convergence of technology. So, telecom and broadcast, under the constitution po, hindi pwedeng magsama yung telecom and broadcast. So, ang tanong po kanina, sino ang regulator? So, sa ngayon po, si NTC, yung mga broadcasters po natin, ina-allow po natin sila na maging value-added service providers. So, we issue what we call value-added service provider. They could be internet service providers.
So, for example, Globe, magpapalabas siya ng Eat Bulaga. That's a value-added service. It's not a broadcast. Tama?
Yes, sir.
It's treated as a value-added service.
Yes, sir.
So, for example, ang Globe nagtayo ng recording studio and then they will now start to shoot telenovelas. That's value-added service. No, it's a Globe company. Diba? Globe company, nagtayo siya ng ganito. Mayroon siyang telenovela and then started streaming in our phones. Is that a value-added service?
Sir, ang ginagawa po ngayon ng mga companies is...
Hindi pa wala pa yung ganun. I'm just saying pwedeng mangyari yan, 'di ba?
Meron na pong nangyayari.
Meron na bang ganun? So how do you treat that?
Streaming po yun.
That's a value-added service.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think si Pierre wants to add.
Sir, Globe has already
Meron na ba?
has already set up a production company
Okay. I
of
didn't
its
know
own. And this is not really the streaming part kasi streaming has to do with communications. Ito yung the final segment after the last mile na we need to also recognize yung content creation aspect. Okay? And if we're not careful, we will fall into the trap of violating the principles of net neutrality. India was one of the first countries to fight against it. This is the problem of the absence of net neutrality kasi. If I, as a telecommunications entity, decides to favor a certain content, and obviously if I favor one, this will disfavor another. What happens is this one is already not being able, the other content providers not being able to compete. Let's let's concretize that a little bit. If, for instance, Globe and ABS-CBN partnered, and they said na, you know what, we will show all ABS-CBN shows for free na siya, pero if you want to watch GMA 7 using that very same service, magbabayad ka. All the people will start watching ABS-CBN na who are using that Globe connection. That's a violation, sir, of the principle of net neutrality, which is if you're going to either allow them to pay for both or pareho silang free.
Net neutrality is already ingrained in our law.
No, sir, we don't have any law protecting net neutrality.
So free for all ngayon.
Yes, sir.
In
That's
other
why we
words.
have the situation where Globe has iFlix and Hook,
Okay.
Smart has Spotify and all those.
So yung kaninang example ko na Globe will put up their own TV studio, wala pang batas na will cover that,
There's
whether
none,
they're a
sir.
broadcast company or a telecom company.
There's
or
none, sir.
both.
Yung content provision naman kasi, sir, is not governed by any law. And I think rightly so. Kasi protected naman siya under our constitutional guarantees of freedom of expression and whatnot. Ang magiging unfair lang po is if we're going to allow Globe to favor their content. Free na yung content nila. Pero any content na made by Smart, like yung games nila or yung for example, if you play League of Legends on Smart and if you move to Globe magbabayad ka, that creates a situation where the PCC should rightly step in kasi hindi na fair yung yung competition space doon sa content.
We recognize the presence of Senator Villanueva, who is also a very passionate and not a big fan of Smart. No, but actually, both of us
Not a big fan of Monopoly, Your Honor.
monopolies. Sorry for that. We're monopolies. No, but both of us were talking, and we were both very interested in the renewal of this franchise of Smart. That's why we want to study the industry as a whole, no, para to know everything in perspective. No. Mr. Yu?
Short comments, Mr. Chair, perhaps to assist, to clarify what Engineer Pierre has already said, and perhaps to assist NTC, no? If Globe or Smart are streaming a program that originated at ABS-CBN, which they do, no? They're merely acting as common carriers, no? Despite being a value-added service, Internet is basically a common carrier service. So they're being neutral about it. It is not their content, and they will stream anyone's content. It can be ABS-CBN, it can be GMA, it can be Netflix. No, so none of this content, whether it's Netflix, GMA, or ABS-CBN, actually originates with Globe. Now the problem may arise, especially in relation to possibly going against provisions of the Constitution, is when they do their own content, when they create their own content. In which case, then you become a media company, no? Although not clearly defined in law, because this is new, that would be the problem they have to address. The other point that Engineer Pierre raised is that if you are now a carrier like Globe or Smart, and you favor, as he said, you say, oh, if you want ABS-CBN on Globe, it doesn't count against your data usage. But if you watch GMA, it will count against your data usage. Essentially, ABS is zero rated ang tawag po doon, technically. And that is now, again, it's not prohibited by law. It is a violation of net neutrality, and it will eventually, I believe, come under the purview of the Competition Commission as anti-competitive practice.
Sir, there's no, since we don't have a law on convergence, then net neutrality is still alien here in our country. They can do it, and they're not violating any law. Tama ba?
Somehow they are.
Only
Sir,
the constitutional portion, because they become
Highest law of
broadcast.
the land.
well, sir, there.
I mean, not only the constitution, but they might be violating the Constitution.
Well, right now,
Might-
sir, they're not violating the
may-
Constitution yet because they are not yet media companies in the sense that they're producing content themselves and transmitting it through their facilities. What they're doing now is taking content from other people. So they're not a media company. They're just, as Mr. Yu has said, a carrier. So Netflix, games, Steam, they carry it lang. They're not violating anything. However, yun nga, if you zero rate it, so that people will move towards your service, that becomes an anti-competitive practice already.
All right. Thank you. Anyone want to add with that topic?
Sir, I forgot the point, the final point I wish to make. Net neutrality is not protected in the Philippines.
Okay.
We're not protecting it. So what happens is that this is the reason why, actually, this is the reason why our telecommunications companies are talking with content providers, so that if the popular content is, let's say, NBA, I will go to Globe.
So in other jurisdictions may batas niyan. Yan,
Yes,
net
sir, meron
neutrality.
po.
So kung ako yung Globe, hindi ko pwedeng sabihin libre si
Zero
NBA,
rated C like this, yes,
and then
sir.
may bayad si PBA.
Correct. Yes, sir, that's
So,
correct.
Hindi pwedeng ganun.
India has prohibited zero rating for Facebook, actually.
Kasi meron tayong ganun dito
Yes,
Facebook.
sir. Yes, sir. Free yung Facebook dito sa Pilipinas for both telcos. So maybe that's not a problem. Maybe. But in India,
For
they
example, yung NBA, can we go back dun sa NBA?
yes, sir.
Yung isang ano lang ang pwede.
Zero rated po
Zero
sa
rated. Which
Globe.
one? Globe.
Yes, sir.
Ang smart hindi.
You pay for it if you're going to access the NBA.com website. So there is no law that prohibits that in the Philippines. India has. It actually was enacted in a response to Facebook trying to come in. The story is Facebook wanted to provide its service to India, but they said we'll provide it for free, but hindi lang Facebook, but certain content lang that they wanted to add. So Facebook plus yung mga affiliate content providers would be free, but CNN would not be free, BBC would not be free, and so on and so forth. So the only news that you would get that na free would come from Facebook, and then CNN and whatever would be paid for, which India said, teka muna, why are you controlling what we want to see? That's essentially it. Violating net neutrality reduces choice. It reduces people's ability to go to where they want to watch, because again, if you're a person on a minimum wage, dun ka na lang sa libre.
NTC, you want to continue your reaction to some of the comments?
Sir, ulitin po natin.
Sorry, naputol ko kayo. Ay,
Yes.
baka na...
So I'd like to read a portion of the RA 7925 wherein 22 years ago, the technology when we have this 7925 is so different. The purpose of the law then was to fix our requirement for fixed landline. Now the technology now is varied na po. Nandiyan na po yung high speed requirement for broadband, and in the very law that we have, it is no longer responsive. That's why for so many years we have been requesting legislation na mag-address po dito. Kagaya po ng ni-raise na convergence of technology, nandun na po. Kagaya din po ng sinabi ng kasama natin regarding net neutrality. We could not violate something that we don't have yet here in the Philippines. Kagaya din po ng fair usage policy. We could not say that we don't have this if in fact we don't have a policy on this. Sa NTC po, ulitin natin, we are a regulatory agency that implements rules and regulation based on a law. So we have various experiences that we go beyond what is seen in the basic law, kasi yun yung proactive instance naman ng NTC. Kaya lang, napupunta po tayo palagi sa korte. So I'd like to read po yung noon. Ang sabi niya po dito is, the fundamental objective of government is to develop and maintain a viable, efficient, reliable, and universal telecom infrastructure using the best available and affordable technologies as a vital tool to nation building and development. So I'd like to emphasize that then the technology is landline. Today, the technology is different.
Ma'am Walchen, puto ko lang kayo, no? So, in other words, you have no regulatory powers over data. Tama?
I could say so, yes, sir.
So, kahit anong reklamo ho namin na mabagal yung internet, wala ho kayong magagawa.
Yes, sir.
But, yung frequency na ginagamit nila is kayo nag-allocate.
Yes, sir.
And in allocating those frequencies, merong minimum performance measures yan. Tama?
Yes, sir.
So are they performing to that standard? Dahil hindi naman pwede tayo kasi we all own the frequencies. So binigay natin sa kanila para gamitin yung frequencies. Pero ang kapalit is service. Obviously marami tayong reklamo ngayon, no? Mabagal, etc., etc. But ang tanong ko lang is, may meet ba nila itong minimum performance measures na ito? Eh kung hindi, I assume hindi nila nami-meet. Pero now you're saying that you don't have any regulatory powers over them. So anong, parang walang mangyayari kasi hindi sila matatakot, hindi nyo kami hawak, binigyan nyo kami frequency, pero there's no pressure for us to perform because there's no regulatory powers over them.
Sir, sa
Senator.
ano po, sa ating fixed landline, we have standards for this.
For fixed landline, yes, but
Sa CMTS din po, we have our standards. Pagdating po sa data, we are in the process of crafting this one.
so wala pa tayo. But
Ang
is it-
nagiging problema, sir, is, kunwari po sa speed, we have not set the speed for
But
the
is it clear
Philippines.
that you have regulatory powers over data? Yan ang
We
gusto kong-
believe, sir, na meron, but we know that we believe po na meron,
Because
but
that's
we know
crucial,
what is included in the basic law.
So what is included in the basic law?
Yes. So in the basic law, what is included there is the technologies for landline and CMTS.
CMTS
Value-added
is-
service is, data is value-added service po. So nagkukulang po tayo doon. So yung,
Ang tanong ko lang, meron ba kayong regulatory powers over data? Do you have that power? That's very crucial eh. Because reklamo kami ng reklamo pero wala pala kayong magagawa. Then
sa value-added service po, we issue certificate of registration. Hanggang dun lang po siya.
but you cannot penalize, you cannot sanction, you cannot tell them, look, pag hindi kayo mag-improve, babawiin ko yung frequency.
Wala pong ganon.
Right.
There's no such thing as minimum requirements. The chair is asking kanina as to whether or not when you allocate the, do you call that, frequencies, may minimum requirement that they should meet. Is there any minimum requirement? Because if not, then
Mr. Chair?
what's the use?
Sir, the frequencies that we have allocated are for CMTS, for
Nothing
2G,
for-
3G, 4G, and these are simultaneously used for data services. So nakaangkla po siya doon sa CMTS. So we have standards for this. Pero sineseparate po natin yung data services.
Still, so may minimum ano sila doon?
Pagdating po sa
Requirement.
CMTS
I remember
po,
lang kasi, Mr. Chair, during the franchise hearing of Smart, they were saying na they're required to somehow meet yung LTE level. And then I asked, because I'm also using a smartphone, wala, never kong nakita yung LTE dun sa phone ko.
Mr. Chair, I think I have the answer to that. Dahil value-added service siya, the NTC is barred from setting tariffs. So they cannot set interconnection charges and so on. However, in Globe versus NTC, the Supreme Court case, Justice Tinga said that the NTC has not only the power but the responsibility to set standards for value-added services, which includes data. All right. For the past 7 years, democracy.net.ph has been proposing a set of standards, and for the past 7 years, the two telcos have proposed it. So, in NTC Memorandum Circular 0707 2011, we were able to get a reliability metric that you should have, you should be above minimum at least 80% of the time, which unfortunately that reliability metric is based on monthly instead of, so talo na naman si prepaid people who get their internet connection daily. In NTC 07 08 2015, which is the new memorandum circular wherein NTC is supposed to be measuring the speeds and the quality of service of the telcos and then publishing it. That was released in 2015, but there has been no publication of the test results yet, which we should know, by the way. It said there that if you market yourself as broadband, you must have a minimum speed of 256 kbps. Now, the telcos accepted that yes, if we're going to sell broadband, it has to be at minimum 256 kbps. And this is the reason why you will not see anybody anymore marketing mobile broadband. They are now marketing it as my mobile internet. Because if they market it as mobile internet, they can use their previous standard of minimum of 12 to 48 kbps, which by the way is lower than dial-up.
Let me just clarify again. You said there's a Supreme Court decision
Yes, sir, there is.
that NTC can regulate.
It has the power to regulate VAS and has the
VAS.
mandate to regulate VAS.
And when you say VAS, when you say regulate VAS, that's the quality
Quality of service and
quality
so on.
of service
Yes,
and
sir.
so on, including tariffs?
No, sir, not including
Just the
tariffs.
quality lang?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that will lead to performance standards?
Yes, sir, it can.
Okay. And obviously, because ang daming nag-complain, the performance standards are not being
We've
met.
been proposing, actually, sir, there are no performance standard. There are no, except for the two circulars that I mentioned, there are no standards for upload speed, download speed, latency, jitter, and packet loss, which are the basic 5 metrics. Yun nga po sir sa sa air conditioning, 'di ba meron pong efficiency rating na naka-sticker doon sa pag binebenta. Same thing for refrigerators. That number is a combination of many numbers like yung wattage niya and all those things. With those 5 metrics that I just mentioned na related sa internet, they can reduce that also to a quality of service index. And we propose that. We've been proposing that for the past 7 years. Yeah, it hasn't been. The telcos have been strongly opposing it.
If it's in the Supreme Court ruling that they have the power to do it, then kahit na mag-oppose sila, they can...
Sir, in defense of the NTC kasi, they are not, let's say, as powerful when the Senate and Congress crafted the Philippine Competition Commission's charter. They baked in certain protections for the PCC. Right now, what happens is that, like in 2015, when Depcom Cabarrios, he was a director at the time, he was saying that he was supporting the government's efforts to improve internet service. There were already veiled threats against him in the media saying that, we will sue you. That's what the telcos were saying. And that has been the weakness of the NTC for the longest time. The personal suit against the officers of the NTC, they sue them in their personal capacity. They're not suing the agency. Kaya nakakawawa po yung NTC. And these are also among the reforms that we want to propose so that the NTC will be able to act as a more effective regulator.
Sabi nga ni Dr. Serafica, liberalization without strong regulation equals disaster. No? And then I think that's where we are right now. No? Ma'am, sorry, napuputol ko kayo, but you can continue.
And another policy objective included in 7925 is a healthy competitive environment shall be fostered, one in which telecommunications carriers are free to make business decisions and to interact with one another in providing telecommunication service with the end in view of encouraging their financial viability. So after 7925, sir, hindi na po sinet ng government that they should be having income lang na mga 12%, ganon. Tinanggal po ng 7925 yun. Nung monopoly na time, nakaset po yun.
Yung kanina ho, we've talked about yung spectrum allocation, ano, and how democracy.net.ph demonstrated that a third party or a third player cannot compete anymore, no? Last time si Dr. Caballos, si Commissioner Caballos mentioned that possible may frequency allocation, may spectrum allocation. But we also found out na meron nga pero hindi naman viable, no? Do you have any, and then we asked, no, a study from you whether when this purchase of 700 megahertz was being done, nagkaroon ho kayo ng study whether in the name of competition, whether this will hamper competition, whether this is good for consumers. Hindi namin nakuha yung study na yun, no? We just got a few of your communications, but can you enlighten us to that comment by democracy.ph na hindi na kaya maging viable? Pwede pumasok a third player, but the viability is another question, eh. And no, graphically kanina napakita sa atin that it's not going to be viable. So what's the history of this
Sir, if
700
you may
megahertz?
allow us to read po doon sa sagot namin doon sa agenda last time, whether such joint acquisition has reduced the viability for a third player into the telecommunications industry. The position of NTC is no, provided that the third player, so ibig sabihin po, a third player from the point of view of NTC is still viable to enter the market, provided that the third player is assisted by the government in the construction of the local access and national network. The total bandwidth available is 257 megahertz, and according to our frequency manager, this is 329. This is sufficient for the local access network. In order for the third player to be viable, affordability level should be reduced. This can be done if its cost is lower than those of the two players. The cost of constructing a national network is very high. The development of the national networks of the incumbent players took them more than 20 years. In fact, it's 22 years, sir. The capital investments were spread over the years. For a third player to enter the market and compete within 3 years, it has to invest huge capital in 3 years. The capital expenditure adds to the cost. To reduce the cost to the third player, the government may have to construct a national network that can be leased to the third player. So in short, in terms of frequency, there is enough frequency, but in terms of capex, the government should come in.
Kung may isa pang Telstra na papasok, assuming Telstra would want to come in again. Sabi niya, hindi, papunta ako ng Pilipinas ulit. You know, Telstra has the financial muscle to do it, no? The 22 years that those two companies took, these guys can probably do it in 1 or 2 years, no? Given the financial muscle. Pwede ba silang pupunta sa NTC and say, give us the same quality of frequencies, no? Para maka-start na kami. Is that still viable right now? Based on your frequency allocation?
Sir, may I defer to Engineer Tolentino po.
Good afternoon, sir. Siguro po, we have to, kumbaga segmentize the spectrum that we are talking about. No? Kasi po,
Kasi Telstra is eyeing to compete with Globe and Smart. So I would assume that whatever Globe and Smart has, they want it also. So they can fight head-on, di ba?
yes,
And
sir.
that's what we want, the consumers.
Yes, sir. So that is impossible, sir, kasi we cannot, di tayo pwedeng mag-invento ng spectrum. The spectrum is limited. Like in the case of, in the case of 800 megahertz, in the 900 megahertz band, which is the GSM 900 na tinatawag natin, we only have like assignable spectrum there of 35 megahertz by 2. I'm talking of the GSM 900. And 35 megahertz by 2, I'm talking of the 35 megahertz by 2 na assigned. Hindi ko sinasabing bakante, sir.
So it
All the 35 megahertz by 2 are taken by these two players.
So
Yun
wala-
po.
wal-
Let
wal-
me finish first, Mr. Galia, okay? And then the GSM 1800 po, what do we have in the GSM 1800 is 75 megahertz by 2. Again, assigned na po both sa two players. So what do we have now for the sinasabi ni Jergalia for to be able to have CMTS capability is the 2100, which is the 3G. In the 2100, if I may correct yung data ni Mr. Galia, what do we have there is assignable ay 60 megahertz by 2 including guard band. So assignable ay is 55 megahertz by 2. So ano po ang assigned natin dyan? Assigned frequency, like for the group of Smart, they have 25 megahertz by 2, and Globe has 10 megahertz by 2. So what there is 20 megahertz by 2 left for the third player. So doon po siya pwedeng pumasok, makipag-head on the provision of voice or using 3G. So, para mag-provide po ng mobile broadband, where meron pong sinole yung nung pong nagkaroon ng coils itong sa 700, meron pong sinoling 10 megahertz by 2. Okay, kung illustrate ko lang po yung 700, sa 700 po natin, ano po ang pinaka-assignable doon? 45 megahertz by 2. Ano po ang nasa dalawa? 25, ang nasa Globe and Smart po, they have shared 35 megahertz by 2. So, meron pong 10 megahertz by 2 na sinole na pwedeng gamitin ng third player. Yun po ang ina-explain namin for a third player.
hindi na siya the same.
Equitable, sir, definitely po hindi. Nung kapareho ng dalawang incumbent.
Oo.
Hindi siya, definitely, sir, hindi.
So in the 900 and the 18, wala na.
Wala na, sir.
But the 900 and the 18, ito yung pangmasa.
You can say that, sir, kasi po, yun po yung voice, SMS na pwedeng i-carry.
Voice and SMS,
Yes,
ito yung
sir.
mga ginagamit ng mga tricycle driver,
Yes, sir.
jeepney driver. And in your expert opinion, gaano kalaki ito sa overall revenue ng, let's say, Smart? Itong 900 and 800. Can you estimate that? Kung ako Smart,
Meron lang po ako I can share only yung nabasa ko, sir, no?
ilan ang kita ko? Ilan ang kita ko dito sa
Yeah.
900 and 800?
Yes, sir. I can only share po yung isang nabasa ko. Ang sabi po nila, mukhang yan ay mga 55% of their income.
So kalahati ng kita ko sa 900 and 800.
Yes, sir. Yung pong services dyan.
So can you say that this is their
Kasi nga po, kasi po nga po ang characteristic po kasi ng mga subscribers ngayon, hindi pa tayo para dun sa mga big data na tinatawag natin, yung patungo dun sa data, ang requirements More on pa po tayo SMS and voice
Is it safe to say na this is their bread and butter, itong 900 and 800?
For now. For now.
No, I'm just
Yes, sir, for now.
I'm just putting this into context again, no? For now, that is their bread and
Yes,
butter.
sir.
So,
But eventually, sir, in the future.
so in all of this spectrum, kasi nakikita ko itong spectrum, kung ako ang Globe and Smart, ayaw ko sila pumasok sa bread and butter ko.
Mhm.
Tama?
Yes, sir. At wala na po silang mapapasukan, Ika.
Oo nga. But, ang tanong ko, bakit nyo pinayagan? Aren't you in your MTC number rule number 510 provides to the maximum practical ito ba yun? Sa yung competition. Meron isang about competition. Ba yun? Ayan, no? Section 4 of 7925, a healthy competitive environment shall be fostered. So, is this a healthy and competitive environment, sir?
Nung po yung pong spectrum na yan po, na-award po siya, hindi po at once. In fact, the 800, we're talking of the 900, na-award po yan in 1994, I guess.
Right. Ba't kailan nila nasarado yung kasi
Yes, sir.
I would assume in 900 and 18, hindi pa sa duopoly yan. Meron pang natitira, tama?
Yun nga po,
Kailan nila sinara yan?
kung pwede ko pong ikwento yung history nga po nitong CMTS natin, the very first generation of CMTS was the AMPS. Yung AMPS po natin, 800. Sino po yung operators natin that time? We have Xtelcom and PhilTel. That is 800 po. And then dumating po ang GSM 800. Nung pumasok po ang GSM 800, sino po ang binigyan natin? Binigyan po natin doon ang Islacom at saka Globe. We have how many operators that
Hindi,
time?
nag-ano kasi sila,
Ang nangyari po kasi sir, naging biktima lang po ito, naging resulta lang po ito kaya naging ganito because of the merger of these companies. Hindi po yung healthy competitive ang question eh. In fact po yung 1800 po sir, na-assign po yan sa Digital. Meron po ang assignment ng Digital, merong assignment po ang Bayantel, may assignment ng
Once upon a time
Xtelcom.
kasi there's a healthy competitive environment. Once
Yes
upon
sir.
a time.
Yes sir, yes sir.
Okay. But if you have, tama nga si ma'am, no? Weak regulation, no? At the end, these guys will naturally kill each other and the healthiest will survive. But the healthiest survivors is not the best for the consumers. Tama? And that's where regulation should come in.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to point out one of the weaknesses when it comes to mergers and acquisitions of telcos in the Philippines. Once they merge, they're able to acquire also spectrum as an asset, wherein is in other countries is prohibited. If I want to purchase, let's say, all the assets, if I were Telstra and I want to purchase all the assets of Liberty Telecom, I can only purchase their fixed assets like their towers and things like that. But I will not be able to purchase yung spectrum license. The spectrum license goes back to the government and becomes reassignable. So when Globe purchased Bayantel or when Smart purchased Digital, the frequencies, the spectrum bands did not go back to government. Instead, PLDT Smart acquired all the frequencies of Digital. It acquired it as an asset. This is one of the things, sir, that we should be able to change. And we don't need regulation for this. Republic Act 3846, the radio control law, empowers the NTC to be able to control the allocation of spectrum. That's the general law governing spectrum. RA 7925 gives the NTC the power over the telecommunications sector. So with those two laws, sir, we already have the capability to perform refarming and reallocation if we want to. So si 900 at si 1800, if we want a new player to come in to compete against the incumbent dominant CMTS players, we can. Ang kailangan lang gawin is we take the spectrum bands back.
But I know taking the frequencies back are, ano yan, no? Meron yatang administrative process yan, no? Judicial. Is it
Yes, sir.
quasi-judicial, no? Which empowered naman ng NTC, eh. No? With that power.
Actually, sir, ang binibili po kasi nila, hindi ako lawyer, no? Yung holding company po kasi binibili, eh. Kaya nga po, paano makakapasok yung yung NTC doon sa ano na yun?
Sige. Mr. Yu?
Yes, just to note, no, before the acquisition of PLDT and Globe of the SMC Telco Holdings, the NTC, regardless of what they consider to be healthy competitive environment, agreed already to the co-use agreement. And that is the basis of the transfer, for example, 700 megahertz to the control of PLDT Globe. So the question now is, why was that allowed in the first place, no? Did NTC at the time feel that such allowing the co-use was healthy for competition? That would be the question. Hiwalay po yun sa acquisition.
Ma'am Walchen, meron kayong pinadalang letter, ano? Itong, may pinadala kayong letter sa amin, no? I think this is the co-use request. I think this is the framework of the co-use. And nakasulat dito, passive infrastructure. Ibig ba sabihin nito, they can also co-use or use each other's infrastructure? Itong passive infrastructure? Kasi nakasulat dito, passive infrastructure includes antenna tower, base station, transceiver, power supply, etc. Ibig ba sabihin, pwede silang gamitin yung Globe, gamitin niya tower ng Smart, gamitin tower ng Globe? Is that what this recommendation is about?
Sir, infrastructures sharing comes in two forms, passive and active. So yung passive po is nakalagay dyan yung antenna tower, base station, yung wala pong electronics sa portion niya.
Eventually, this memo allows, or this memo basically allowed the telcos to use each other's infrastructure. Tama ba?
Yes, sir.
So, NTC, sinabi nyo sa kanila, o pwede nyong gamitin yung tower ko.
If
Tower ng isa't isa.
yes, sir. If they agree to share passive infrastructure, they could, sir.
So, they can. And
Yes,
this
they
memo
can.
allows it, favorably.
Sir, this is
considered.
a part of our discussion wherein sinasabi natin that infrastructure sharings comes in two form. So if in their agreement they would like to share sa passive infrastructure to lessen the number of cell sites to be built within the Philippines, pwede po siya.
Pwede yun.
Opo.
You allow it. NTC will allow it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's the bottom line, no? My question kasi is, madalas mabugbog yung LGUs eh. No? Sinasabi kasi nung mga telcos na yung LGU kasi mabagal si Mayor kaya hindi kami makapatayo ng towers, therefore pangit yung service. But if you are saying that that is allowed anyways, so there's no prohibition for them to put their equipment on each other's cell towers. Tama po ba?
Yes, sir. If in their agreement as a business entity, sir, they agree to share towers para malesen po yung gastos nila, pwede po,
I mean,
sir.
there's no legal prohibition for them to do it.
Yes, sir. There's none.
So how come they're still blaming the LGUs?
Sir, yung case po ng LGUs is they are allowing us to appreciate that when they get the permits coming from the local government units, the processing time is mahaba at yung requirements niya paulit-ulit.
But if you, meron ba kayong study na, for example, kasi meron dito sa letter nyo sa kanila, immediate and commence the implementation of this co-use. So, ibig sabihin, pwede na sila mag-share ng tower. Tama ha? Tama ho?
Yes, sir. Mag-share po ng passive and active infrastructure.
Oo. This approval of co-use basically tells them that you can now use each other's tower and passive infrastructure. My question is, with that ability, mako-cover na ba nila yung dapat nila i-cover?
Sir, pag titingnan po
Para
natin...
hindi na nila sisihin si Mayor? I mean, they can now put towers all over the place or each other's, ano?
Sir, to cover po yung buong Pilipinas para sa requirement natin and with the current number of cell sites that they have, they still need to cover po na marami pang areas.
Do you have a study on how many...
Meron po kaming...
For example, I'm just, ano lang, no? Ang target ni Smart is, let's say, 1,000. Kay Globe, 1,000. Eh, ngayon, pwede ng co-use. Di 2,000 na kaagad. Yan, ilan pa yung balance na dapat ipatayo? Meron ba tayong ganun?
Sir, ang ginagawa po namin ngayon is minamap po namin yung kanilang rollout plan para makita po namin kung saan yung mga areas in the Philippines wherein they plan to roll po yung mga cell sites na to. Now, pagdating po doon sa requirement nila sa local government, truly enough, we have been moving from one government agency to another looking into this situation po. Actually, the DICT and NTC will be holding this Telecommunications Summit in March 9 to 10 because we were instructed by the DICT Secretary to once and for all look into the situation ng bakit mahal ang internet, mabagal at kung ano yung coverage niya. So on March 9 to 10 po, we will be presenting po yung mga situation at ano yung actual situation in the field.
I think after 3 hearings, medyo alam ko na kung bakit, ano? And I think to sum it up, it's really, part of it is really regulation. No? And I'm not pinpointing at you guys, no? On a personal, ano, no? But the institution as a whole. No? At we will also take a look at the laws that Pierre mentioned because ako naniniwala na may mga batas na pwede kayong gamitin eh. no, to foster healthy competition. No? But I want to take a look at that also.
Mr. Chair, I just really have to point out that the NTC right now has a lot of powers but has also a lot of threats. So that's one of the things that we need to help the NTC with. The commissioners can be sued on their personal capacity, not just the commissioners but even officers of the different branches or even regional directors and whatnot.
Right.
So they do have the powers, they do have the mandate to do all these things, even up to refarming and reallocation through the normal quasi-judicial process. But if there's the sword of Damocles hand over their head all the time, it's really going to not be healthy for the NTC to do it.
We're actually running out of time, although this is really very interesting. You know, we talked about the regulatory framework. Any last words? And Mr. Samaniego?
Yes, first of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was not able to attend in some previous meetings, but for the last 9 years, for this particular internet time pa ni Commissioner Sarmiento sa NTC, Liel Cordoba, okay. But I'm very happy that you raised most of the complaints, concerns of the consumers. Now, number one, yung sinabi niyo po na new players, pag pumasok po talaga ang new players, maayos po lahat ito. Mapapababa, magaganda ang quality. Pero sana kunin nila si Pia Worsbach para makabalik sila rito. Kasi definitely haharangin yan. That's reality. The second, tungkol dun sa laws or powers ng NTC, they have it. Ang kailangan lang, taasan yung punishment sa telcos. Now, the consumer will love you kung sasagutin ng NTC yung complaints ng decades ng consumer, yung kinakainan sila sa prepaid. It's not 55%, it's about 77% prepaid. Bread and butter nila yon. Okay. Hanggang ngayon, wala silang sagot doon. Even the DTI, binabumbered sila ng mga tawag kasi meron silang department yung Consumer Complaint Welfare. Ilang beses na po, dekada na rin namin pinagmimitingan na wala. Kaya nagkaroon ng coalition ito. We've been successful doon sa drugs, pharmaceuticals, nagkaroon na tayo ng generics, proliferation, kaya bumaba. Now, ang gusto ko lang malaman sa NTC, kung kailan nila palalabas yung testing ng result. Kasi niraise din ho namin yung truth in advertising. Tama si Mr. What's your name? Here, na binabago ng telcos pag mabubuko na sila. Okay. Now, if I will bring you
Sir,
doon in 1994.
1 minute, sir. Dahil
Yeah.
tawag 3 o'clock yung session namin.
Okay,
so,
okay.
1 minute.
Yes, what I'm saying is that kung masusuportahan nyo po yung NTC, kasi nakagapos ang kamay nila hindi sila pwede magalaw madidemanda sila. Tapos yung punishment in terms of monetary sa telcos, na maibalik, ma-reimburse, not only the janitors, not only the tricycle drivers, not only the security guards, and even your staff perhaps. Hindi naman lahat naka-postpaid dyan prepaid. We did it at Meralco. Yung Meralco, dinideduct na sa consumer Pero dito hindi hindi nila magawa ng paraan paano maibalik. Pero, sir, I'm not saying I'll make you president, pero pag nagawa mo yan, mamahalin ka ng consumer tungkol dito.
Sir Maniego, meron kayong literature on that? May petition ba kayong final?
Marami na kaming na-file na mga consumer, yung ano yung mga...
Yung refund na yan,
Yes, meron.
padala niyo po ako para
Yes,
mabasa namin.
Yes, I will.
Alright.
I will. Inaano nila yung mga... Pero, sir, believe me, pag naiayos yun sa prepaid, mas marami yun. Not, I don't know, 55%, ours is 77%.
Sige po.
Bread and butter nila yun. Napapababaho, sir. Kita nyo yung sun. Nung pumasok ang sun, ang telcos dati 18 pesos per minute.
Right.
Nung pumasok po yung sun, nag-unli, binili naman ng telcos. Sus Mario Joseph. Ganun no. Pag new players ang pumasok, mababago ho lahat yan. Yung Telstra, kunin niya si Elon Musk, pwede siyang pumasok.
Alright.
National broadband ang kailangan din natin, pero Pare medyo malaki din ata ang budget nun eh. Pero baka si Duterte baka pwede niyang gawa ng paraan. Eh, hindi na tayo sir mag-uusap pag mayroong national broadband.
Alright.
Pati mga empleyado niyo tuntua.
Sige.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Samaniego. Just to recap, no, from NTC again, no, ito sinabi ko na kay Commissioner Cabarrios, yung proposed additional powers for NTC or proposed reorganization or strengthening of NTC, please submit to us kung meron kayong mga nakitang mga dapat baguhin in the way NTC is structured. And we are also requesting for the feasibility study of that 700 megahertz. Kulang ho dito, kasulat lang dito yung approval, but yung feasibility study on how the 700 megahertz can be beneficial to the consumers. No? I remember last time sinabi rin ni Mr. Cabarrios na meron feasibility study, but we haven't received it yet. For PIDS, please submit to us also your position paper on how to strengthen the regulatory institution of the telecom industry. No, I think kanina you mentioned it, some of the concepts, but we want to look at that in depth. What else? And pretty much that's it, no? Any last words from anyone, Mr. Pierre?
Sir, nabanggit ng NTC na may rollout plan ang dalawang telco as a
Yes,
result of the co-use.
Meron.
And that's supposedly dapat by next month okay na ang internet natin.
Yes.
Pero yun nga, we don't know yet. In relation
We
to that,
tackled that during last hearing. Eh.
can we get a copy of those rollout plans? Baka naman there's something that we can see that makes it that we can analyze to see how it is going to benefit whom and where. Baka na
Yes.
naman sir, urban na naman yung ma-benefit tapos sina Divilacan and Isabela will still not have a tower.
Okay. I agree, no, that maraming mga conditions linagay ang NTC, no, for that co-use. There's actually 6 conditions. Please submit to us the status of these conditions. We want to know exactly kung nasaan na sila and kung meron bang improvement, no, sa services na pinangako nila, no. With that, tomorrow we have another, not my hearing, but the Public Services Committee. Ito yung renewal ng franchise ng Smart, no, 2 p.m. I think everyone's welcome to join that hearing and to listen. That will deal specifically with the renewal of Smart franchise. But then again, thank you very much for your participation, and we will furnish you a copy of our committee report. Siguro bago namin i-finalize, we'll ask for your comments. No? Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.